what's up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and today I'm reviewing the new Deftones remix album Black Stallion. And hey, if you like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. Now, believe it or not, I know I definitely can't, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of one of my favorite albums of all time, White Pony. I've been listening to this since like way back in 2000, and man, over the years it just continues to probably be one of my most listened albums of all time. And I know Deftones fans seem to be like kind of either really hot or cold on this album. I feel like most Deftones fans agree that it's one of their best, but there are definitely those out there who just don't like it at all, and that's fine too. But me personally, I am just in love with this album. I love pretty much every song. I think it's one of their most consistent works, and when I did my Deftones tier list, there was a reason why this album was S tier. But now, as a part of this celebration, we've got a bunch of different artists doing their own remixed versions of the different tracks from the album, and so that's what we're talking about today. So digging into the ones that I enjoyed the most, I think Digital Bath from DJ Shadow is a really solid one from the earlier part of the album. It keeps the same kind of vibe of the original track, but also adds some kind of like R&B and hip-hop flavor to it. It's super chill, it's really just relaxing to listen to, and it adds some pretty stunning synth effects and layered atmosphere towards the end as well. So an interesting culmination of sounds that shouldn't work, but really does. I guess then again, with Chino's kind of hip-hop leanings and some of the music he enjoys in that area, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. I also really love Street Carp from Phantogram. This is a very complementary set of sounds. I actually really like Phantogram's early material. This is actually one of the few contributors that I was familiar with ahead of time. I actually saw them play at Lollapalooza, and I think, now that I'm looking back on it, it might have been the same Lollapalooza that I saw Deftones at, but I could be mixing the years up. In any case, I really love that they wove their own very chill electronic style into this one, even adding some vocals to it that really do actually add and contribute to the overall composition in a complementary way. And again, still kind of kept that Deftones flavor to it at the same time. For me, this is like a perfect example of how to put your own stamp on a song. Now, I do like the Robert Smith version of Teenager, but unlike the last track that I was talking about, it feels mostly kind of like it's still just Teenager. It's like the original track, but with some additional piano added onto it, so not as much of a transformation on this one. I expected a little bit more from the leader of The Cure, but it's still pretty cool, and there's plenty of crossover history here given that Deftones have actually covered The Cure in the past live, and then they owe a lot of the sound on, I feel like, the new album Ohms to The Cure as well. So another one that actually kind of surprised me, Mike Shinoda of Linkin Park fame actually knocked it out of the park with his remix of Passenger. This is another fan favorite track, so it's a big undertaking to tweak this one in any way, but this version kills it. It's got an excellent duality of the floating ethereal verses with the cyclical key melodies, and then the harder hitting start-stop distortion on the chorus. He's basically managed to make this sound like a Linkin Park song without detracting from Maynard's already fantastic guest vocals on this one. Very interesting fusion. Glad he also kept the raunchy squealing guitars in the end. One that I was not a big fan of, probably my least favorite, is the remix of Knife Party from Purity Ring. It has some cool added layers to it, but I really hate the additional vocals on this one. On the chorus, they added their own version of like how to say that part, and it just feels really out of place and distracting and even kind of cringy to me. And to be fair too, this is one of my favorite songs on the album, maybe my favorite song on the album, so the idea of messing with it almost seems like sacrilege. It's perfection as it is, and especially the way that they've drowned out the haunting, shrieking guest vocals just feels absolutely criminal to me. In general, I feel like it is the heavier songs that just don't seem to translate quite as well. I think they needed more of a heavy, industrialized treatment to most of those. I would have been interested to hear like Kevin Key from Skinny Puppy do a remix, because I think he would have done a fantastic job. They did admittedly take this approach with some of the tracks, especially I'm thinking like the Squarepusher version of the admittedly pretty epic closer Pink Maggot, and also the Trevor Jackson version of Korea, which is easily one of the biggest transformations on the album, with the end result being pretty much unrecognizable. It sounds nothing like the original, yet there's still just enough of that foundational element and that original original concept kind of floating through it, that this one actually also works pretty well for me. I guess the tourist version of Change also fits into the category of songs that sound nothing like the original, but this one doesn't work as well for me. I found it to be a little bit underwhelming, and I think they just lost a little too much of the Deftones flavor in translation. In the end, it sounds more like a kind of like the Postal Service track, which I love the Postal Service, but that's not really what I'm looking for when I'm listening to Deftones. So overall, looking at the album just as a complete work, it's a decent tribute that I enjoyed listening to, but as far as would I buy it and listen to it over and over again, not really. If I'm doing something like that, I'd honestly rather revisit the classic B-Sides album, and yes, I have the fancy booklet version of this. This was a must. I got it for Christmas, many years ago, the year that came out, actually. And there's a lot of cool stuff on there. And then also like B-sides that you can like mostly just find on the internet or that are from like soundtracks and stuff. That's kind of my preference when I'm listening to kind of the more off-the-wall Deftones material as opposed to remixes from other projects. But again, like, it's still pretty cool. I don't really feel like using my usual scales to rate this album. Honestly, really makes sense. But yeah, I guess if I was giving it an overall grade, it's kind of like a solid B for a remix album. And to be honest too, and to be totally fair, like, I don't listen to a ton of remix albums. It's not generally my thing, and this is still kind of my early listens of it. So take that into account and do with it what you will as you're considering my thoughts on it. I'm really just coming to this as a big Deftones fan, just interested to see what kind of spins people put on their music. So definitely worth a listen, but not necessarily a must for your collection unless you're a total diehard. But yeah, now you let me know down in the comments, what did you think of this album? What was your favorite remix and why? Let's have a conversation going. Do you love White Pony? Do you hate it? Let's talk about that as well. What's your favorite Deftones album? Your favorite Deftones track? All that stuff will be fun to talk about down below. But even more importantly, stick around because I got plenty more videos coming right after this one. In addition to full album reviews from newer albums, I've also got album tier lists, retro reviews, interviews with bands on the podcast, you name it, we've got it. So again, plenty of reasons to subscribe if you have not already. You can also support us on Patreon. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.